Karina Roberts. In 2007, in Beaverton, Oregon, 25-year-old Karina Roberts gave birth to a stillborn baby and months later had her fallopian tubes tied, making it impossible for her to ever conceive again. About a year later, Karina told her boyfriend Jan Schubin and everyone around her that she was pregnant again with twins, and to sell the lie, she padded her stomach with towels and began preparing a nursery. By early 2009, Karina had kept the lie going for months, but her fake due date was getting closer, and she knew the only way to keep everyone believing was to produce a real baby. And since her body couldn't make one, she decided to go find one. Karina began contacting pregnant women across the Portland area through Craigslist, offering to buy or trade baby clothes, which was never about the clothes. In late May 2009, 21-year-old Heather Snively, who had just moved to Oregon from Maryland with her fiancé Chris Pop, was 8 months pregnant and browsing Craigslist for baby clothes when she found one of Karina's posts and replied. Karina told Heather she was also expecting twins, and after days of messaging about baby names and due dates, she invited Heather to her home on Northwest Mill Creek Drive to pick up the clothes. Heather came back more than once, and each time Karina greeted her at the door with her padded stomach and a smile. On the afternoon of June 5, 2009, Heather drove to Karina's house one last time, expecting another visit about baby clothes. Karina led her toward the bathroom, pulled out a collapsible police baton, and struck Heather in the head. Heather fought back hard enough to tear fistfuls of Karina's hair out and claw a 5-inch scratch down her neck. But Karina struck her again and again until Heather collapsed on the bathroom floor. Heather died on that bathroom floor at 21 years old, 8 months pregnant with a boy she and Chris had planned to name John Stephen. What happened next is the kind of scene that would make Jigsaw himself say, "Okay, that's a bit much." Karina used a straight razor to cut the baby from Heather's body, wrapped Heather in carpet, and shoved her into the crawl space beneath the kitchen floor. At 2:42 that afternoon, Karina called Jan at work and told him she needed him home immediately. When Jan walked through the front door, he found blood on the floor trailing to the bathroom, where Karina sat in the bathtub holding a lifeless newborn. Jan started CPR on the infant and called 911, and paramedics rushed both Karina and the baby to Providence St. Vincent Medical Center. Doctors worked to resuscitate the infant, but the baby never took a single breath, and when they examined Karina, her body showed no signs of having given birth at all. Police returned to the house on Mill Creek Drive and found Heather's body in the crawl space, exactly where Karina had hidden her. Police arrested Karina Roberts and charged her with aggravated murder, and on October 6, 2010, she pleaded guilty and told the judge she was doing so because she was in fact guilty. A judge sentenced her to life in prison without the possibility of parole, a plea deal that took the death penalty off the table. Karina Roberts remains locked inside Coffee Creek Correctional Facility in Wilsonville, Oregon, serving a sentence that will never end. Under Oregon law, prosecutors could not charge her with baby John Stephen's death because he never drew a single breath outside the womb, meaning Karina Roberts took 2 lives but will only ever answer for one. Brady Oestrike. In July 2014 in Wyoming, Michigan, 18-year-old Brooke Slocum posted an ad on Craigslist asking for money because she and her boyfriend, 25-year-old Charles Oppenir, were homeless and 8 months pregnant. A 31-year-old man named Brady Oestrike answered the ad, not to help, but to offer them $120 for activities we can't say on YouTube at a nearby park. But before they ever met in person, Brady spent the weekend turning his basement on Taft Avenue into a torture chamber. He hung ropes and whips from the ceiling, bolted chains and a pulley to the beams, and set a dog cage in the corner with lingerie folded neatly on top. He set up cameras to film the room, and only then went looking for someone to put in it. At the park, Brooke stood just feet away when Brady pulled out a gun and shot Charles in the head. She watched the man she loved collapse in front of her. Then Brady took out a blade, and Brooke had to stand there as he cut Charles's head from his body. Brady hid what was left of Charles under tree branches, took the head with him, and took Brooke. Brady chained Brooke by the neck to the basement floor, locked her in the dog cage, and strung her arms from the ceiling with the pulley. For 5 days, Brady assaulted her, whipped her, dressed her in lingerie, suspended her from the ceiling, and locked her back in the cage when he was done. Nobody on Taft Avenue knocked on the door, and nobody reported a missing pregnant teenager for the entire 5 days. He filmed every session on the cameras he had set up the week before. On the 5th day, Brady strangled Brooke to death in that room. Her unborn daughter, 4 weeks from being born, died with her. 4 days after the murder, someone walking through Gizon Park stumbled on Charles Oppenier's headless body still lying under the tree branches. Detectives pulled the Craigslist messages between Brady and Brooke, found the alias Hard Mike, and tracked it back to Brady Oestrike's Facebook profile. The next morning, officers parked outside Brady's house on Taft Avenue, but Brady spotted them through the window, bolted to his yellow Chevy Cobalt, and tore out of the driveway. Police chased him through the streets to the Burton Street overpass above US 131, where Brady slammed the Cobalt into a concrete barrier and put a bullet in his own head. When officers pried open the trunk of the yellow Cobalt, Brooke Slocum was inside. Back at the house on Taft Avenue, police found the videotapes of him assaulting Brooke in that basement. Brooke's daughter was going to be named Audie Lynn, and she was 4 weeks away from meeting the world. Brooke had posted that Craigslist ad asking for help, and the only person who answered built the room first. Richard Beasley. In the summer of 2011, 52-year-old Richard Beasley began posting ads on Craigslist across Ohio. He was looking for a caretaker for a 688-acre cattle farm in Noble County. The job paid $300 a week, came with a free trailer, and promised a fresh start. Exactly the kind of offer that caught the attention of men struggling in the aftermath of the Great Recession. More than 100 people responded. Beasley didn't own a farm. He didn't own any land at all. Instead, he met applicants at mall food courts around Akron, introducing himself as Chaplain Rich, a volunteer street chaplain and man of God. He talked about honest work and second chances. And as he listened, he quietly screened them. Anyone who mentioned a wife, a fiancé, or close family never heard from him again. Beasley only followed up with men who seemed completely alone. When he chose someone, he arranged to show them the property in Noble County. He drove them there himself, with 16-year-old Brogan Rafferty in the passenger seat. Rafferty was a high school sophomore Beasley had known since the boy was 9 years old, grooming him over years into something between a surrogate son and an accomplice. Once on the property, Beasley would walk the applicant into the woods, talking as if he were pointing out fence lines or pasture boundaries. Then, when they were far enough from the road, he shot them in the head. Between August and November 2011, 3 men were killed this way and buried in shallow graves on the land. After each murder, Beasley took the victim's identity. He used their names to open bank accounts, rent housing, and apply for jobs. Because the men he chose had no one waiting for regular phone calls, no spouses, no fiancés, no one noticed when they simply disappeared. On November 6, 2011, a 49-year-old landscaper from South Carolina named Scott Davis answered the same ad, hoping to move closer to his aging mother in Ohio. Beasley met Davis for breakfast at a restaurant near the property and brought Rafferty along, introducing the teenager as his nephew. After the meal, the 3 of them drove to the property in Noble County, and Beasley told Davis they would walk into the woods together to look at the farm. As they walked, Beasley fell behind Davis on the trail and pulled a gun, and Davis heard the click of the hammer cocking behind his head. Davis spun around and threw his arm into the barrel of the gun as Beasley fired, and the bullet went through his right elbow. Davis ran into the woods while Beasley kept firing behind him and did not stop running until the gunshot stopped. He hid in a dry creek bed until dark, then climbed a hill and saw the light of a farmhouse in the distance. Davis made it to the farmhouse door with blood running down his arm and asked the homeowner to call 911. Police traced the Craigslist ad to Beasley's email address and arrested him on November 16, 2011, 10 days after Davis escaped the woods. Search teams found 3 bodies buried in shallow graves on the property, all men who had answered the same ad, all shot in the head. In March 2013, a jury convicted Beasley of 3 counts of aggravated murder and sentenced him to death for each one. Brogan Rafferty, the boy Beasley had groomed since he was 9, was convicted separately and sentenced to life in prison without parole at 17 years old. When police searched Beasley's computer, they found he had already posted a new Craigslist ad looking for his next caretaker, Miranda and Philip Barbour. On November 11, 2013, in Selinsgrove, Pennsylvania, 18-year-old Miranda Barbour posted an ad on Craigslist offering men paid companionship for $100. She and her husband, 22-year-old Philip Barbour, had met in North Carolina, where the two bonded over a shared fascination with Satanism and violence, and married just 3 weeks before she posted that Craigslist ad, still very much in the honeymoon phase. That November day was Philip's 22nd birthday, and the couple had already decided they were going to celebrate it by killing someone together. Miranda had already used Craigslist to meet around 30 men through ads just like this one. They had tried to kill before, but every attempt fell through, until a 42-year-old married man named Troy LaFerrara answered Miranda's Craigslist ad and agreed to meet that night. Miranda picked LaFerrara up at the Susquehanna Valley Mall parking lot that evening, while Philip lay under a blanket in the back seat of her red Honda CR-V, cord wrapped around both fists, waiting for her signal. Before giving the signal, Miranda told LaFerrara she had lied about her age and that she was only 16. LaFerrara said that was fine and kept his hand on her thigh. Miranda gave Philip the signal, asking LaFerrara whether he had seen the stars that night, but behind her, Philip did not move. Miranda pulled a knife from between the front seats and drove it into LaFerrara. Philip finally lunged from the back seat and wrapped the cord around LaFerrara's neck, but LaFerrara thrashed against both of them, clawing at the cord and the door handle. Miranda stabbed LaFerrara 20 times before his body finally went still inside the car. The couple drove to Sunbury, dumped LaFerrara's body in an alley behind Catawissa Avenue, and took his wallet. They stopped at a Walmart, bought garbage bags, carpet cleaner, and paper towels, scrubbed the blood out of the Honda, and drove to a strip club in Harrisburg to finish celebrating Philip's birthday. The next morning, a woman in Sunbury looked out her back window and saw LaFerrara's body in the alley behind her house, with no identification on him. Detectives traced the last call on LaFerrara's phone to Miranda's number. When police brought Miranda in for questioning, she claimed she had stabbed LaFerrara alone in self-defense after he groped her. 3 days later, police arrested Philip after Walmart surveillance footage showed him buying the cleaning supplies on the night of the murder. Philip told detectives the couple killed LaFerrara because they just wanted to murder someone together. Both pleaded guilty, and on September 18, 2014, Miranda and Philip Barbour were sentenced to life in prison without parole. Miranda later told a journalist she had killed at least 22 people and stopped counting after that, but the only murder anyone could prove started with a $100 Craigslist ad. Philip Markoff. On April 10, 2009, in Boston, 29-year-old escort Tricia Leffler posted an ad on Craigslist offering erotic massage services at the Westin Copley Place Hotel, and 23-year-old Philip Markoff, a second-year medical student 4 months from marrying his fiancée, responded and arranged to meet her. Markoff, whose gambling addiction had left him owing Foxwoods Casino in Connecticut more than he could repay, walked with Leffler to her hotel room and pulled a handgun on her. He bound her with zip ties and duct tape, took $800 in cash and her debit card, and walked out of the Westin. 2 days later, Markoff drove to Foxwoods and gambled the stolen money at the tables. The money lasted 4 days, and Markoff needed more, and he knew exactly where to find it. Women on Craigslist who carried cash, met clients alone in hotel rooms, and never called police. 26-year-old aspiring model Julissa Brisman posted an ad offering massage services at the Copley Marriott, and when Markoff contacted her, she treated him like any other client. On the evening of April 14th, Markoff walked into Brisman's room on the 20th floor of the Copley Marriott, carrying the same handgun, zip ties, and duct tape he had used on Leffler 4 days earlier. Markoff tried to bind Brisman the way he had bound Leffler, but Brisman, who weighed barely 100 pounds, fought him. Markoff bashed her in the head with the pistol and shot her 3 times at close range, once through the heart, once through the hip, and once through the lung. Screams came from the 20th floor, and guests called 911, and when officers reached the room, they found Brisman collapsed in the doorway, covered in blood, still alive. Paramedics rushed Brisman to Boston Medical Center, the same teaching hospital where Markoff was studying to become a doctor, and she died there that night. On April 16th, 2 days after killing Brisman, Markoff drove back to Foxwoods and walked out with $5,300 in winnings. Police traced emails on Brisman's laptop back to Markoff, and on April 20th, 6 days after the murder, officers pulled him over on Interstate 95 with $1,600 in cash and his fiancée Megan McAllister in the car, both heading to Foxwoods. On August 15, 2010, Markoff sharpened a jail pen into a razor, slashed the arteries in his neck, ankles and legs inside his cell at Nashua Street Jail, stuffed toilet paper down his throat, and pulled a plastic bag over his head. Guards found him on the floor with the name Megan written on the wall in his own blood. David Spar. In July 2010, in Jacksonville, Florida, 21-year-old Tiara Poole posted a personal ad on Craigslist seeking companionship because her husband was deployed overseas, and she was living alone in her apartment on Hodges Boulevard. A 19-year-old named David Spar answered her ad while visiting his grandmother at St. Vincent's Medical Center, and the two texted for about a week before agreeing to meet at the hospital. But David was not looking for companionship. He wanted to experience what it felt like to kill another person, and he had spent that entire week deciding exactly how he would do it. David met Tiara at the same hospital where his grandmother was being treated, and from there she drove him to her apartment on Hodges Boulevard. At the apartment, David and Tiara became intimate, and at some point David walked to her kitchen and took a knife. He stabbed her 89 times, and she remained conscious through at least 88 of them. When Tiara finally stopped fighting, David tilted her head back and cut her throat, then left her on the bedroom floor. After cleaning the knife, David stole Tiara's PlayStation, walked out of the apartment, and drove back to Georgia as if nothing had happened. The next day, he walked into a pawn shop in Georgia and sold Tiara's PlayStation for cash, the only thing he took from the woman he had stabbed 89 times. 4 days later, a friend went to check on Tiara and found her body in the bedroom. For 4 days, Tiara had been lying on that bedroom floor, and nobody had come looking. Detectives traced the Craigslist messages between Tiara and the man she knew as Andy back to David Spar, and police arrested him in Georgia. From jail, David wrote a letter to his ex-girlfriend confessing everything, writing that he had planned the murder for a week and a half, that he did it for the rush, that he enjoyed it, and that he hoped to do it again. A jury sentenced David Spar to death. Michael John Anderson. In October 2007, in Savage, Minnesota, 19-year-old Michael John Anderson posted an ad on Craigslist pretending to be a woman named Amy looking for a nanny to watch her 5-year-old daughter. Michael had no wife and no children. He had created Amy from nothing because he wanted to find out what it felt like to kill someone. 24-year-old Catherine Olson, who had been taking nanny jobs to save money, responded to the ad and began emailing the woman she thought was Amy. Catherine mentioned to her roommate that the woman seemed kind of strange, but she drove to Savage anyway and arrived at Michael's house expecting a mother with a child. Catherine walked through the front door and found Michael waiting with his father's .357 Magnum. Catherine turned to run, and Michael shot her in the back. The bullet did not kill her, and Michael dragged her through the house, put her in a sleeping bag, and loaded her into the trunk of her own car. Catherine was still conscious when the trunk closed, and she stayed that way for approximately 20 minutes in the dark before she bled to death. Michael drove Catherine's car to a nature preserve 5 blocks from his house, left it there with her body still in the trunk, and went home. The next morning, someone found Catherine's car in the preserve, and when police opened the trunk, Catherine was still in the sleeping bag with her ankles bound in red twine and a pearl necklace clenched between her fingers. Police found bloody towels with Michael's name on them in a garbage can near the preserve, traced the Craigslist ad back to his email, and arrested him the same day. Michael told police he had nothing to do with it, then changed his story and said a friend had shot Catherine because the friend thought it would be funny, and that was the best explanation he had. A jury found Michael guilty of first-degree murder, and a judge sentenced him to life in prison without parole, calling him a coward for shooting a woman in the back. Michael John Anderson was the first person the media ever called a Craigslist killer, and every case in this video happened after his.